Welcome to the AdSense Flippers podcast. Are you sick and tired of gurus who have plenty of ideas but are short on substance? Worried that ebook you bought for $17.95 won't bring you the personal and financial freedom you long for? Hey, you're not alone. Join thousands of others in their pursuit of niche profits without the bullshit. Straight from your hosts, Justin and Joe of AdSense Flippers.
Welcome to episode 27 of the AdSense Flippers podcast. I'm your host, Justin Cook. I'm here with my business partner extraordinaire, Joe Magnotti. What's up, buddy?
Hey, everybody.
We've got a fantastic episode lined up for you this week. We're interviewing Thomas Smale from flippingenterprises.com. He's a very high-level broker, so he buys and sells websites and connects buyers and sellers. He did a great interview with us. We went over how to build sites, how to become a broker. We went over some of the specifics about his business. Got some really good, meaty details from him, I thought.
Yeah, very interesting stuff.
So anyway, we'll get to that in a minute, but first we've got our news and updates. First one, Joe is heading to Puerto Galera in August.
Yeah, probably going to head up to Manila for a couple of days first, maybe as long as a week, and then over to Puerto Galera to see the Tropical MBA guys and their summit, their little workshop thing that they've been doing over there. We missed the one in June, so I want to try to hit this one.
Yeah, man, I really missed the intern thing. I love the fact that Tropical MBA was all about the internships, but I think they got a good thing going now. Basically, they're bringing out entrepreneurs that want to get their startup off the ground, and they're meeting in Puerto Galera for a couple of weeks and just knocking it out. I know the first one was a big success, so I know you're really looking forward to going to the one in August. I'm going to be hitting up the Tropical MBA in October, most likely. They're doing a third one this year, and I'll be there for that. And then shortly after, we're going to Bangkok in mid-October for a meetup.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of traveling between now and November.
I know, it's been so quiet, man. We did the Cebu thing. We just kind of been chilling down here in Davao. We got a lot of travel. And then I think we're going to Manila again in November for another meetup with some sharp guys there. So that'd be interesting. We can see our buddies there.
Yeah, it should be fun.
John, Paul, and Matt. That'd be cool. hang out with you guys a bit. Next thing, we've been switching all of our niche sites from the old GoDaddy hosting accounts over to HostGator.
Yeah, I just had to bite the bullet. Even though it's several hundred sites, Justin, man, I just can't take the slowness of the sites. I can't take GoDaddy's terrible cPanel configuration. It's not even really a cPanel there. They call it Hosting Control Center. The HostGator is just so much better.
Yeah, I didn't know any of this, and I was actually surprised. I was like, dude, what are you doing switching over to HostGator? We've had some problems, but I guess we've just had problems with AdSense Flippers, AdSenseFlippers.com there, and that's due to our, opt-in pop-up domination plugin, right?
Yeah, and it's on a virtual private server where runaway processes due to that pop-up, so, that's been a problem, but we'll get that corrected and fixed and shouldn't have that with anything else.
Third point, a couple of weeks ago, I went to the Davao Blogger Social Media Day and was asked to be on the panel there. So I got to talk to a bunch of young bloggers here in Davao City about how to monetize their blog, how to make it, really niche down to something that's really good, how to use Facebook and Twitter. And that was really exciting. That was fun to be on the panel there. I was there with some other interesting guys. One of them was Nextbat and a couple of Filipinos. And just talking social media, it was cool.
Yeah, I missed it, but from what I understand, you guys did really well, and it was really interesting.
Yeah, they have one of those workplaces there where you can rent the desk by the day kind of place, and it was really kind of nice and modern. It was kind of a cool thing to see in Davao. I mean, I could see this place turning into a startup type town for Filipinos. It hasn't, and it's not there yet, but I could see that happening in the next couple of years.
Interesting.
Davao's much different than when we first moved here, right?
Yeah, we just had a meeting tonight with an outsourcing customer, and we were telling him about how when we first started coming here in 2008, it's changed so much.
Oh my God, yeah, trying to find a good restaurant in town and just
just the roads. The roads. Now, every time it rains, it doesn't flood out completely.
You knew all the foreigners here because they, came over here to retire. Those are the only foreigners here. It's crazy, man. But yeah, it's really changing. We got some younger entrepreneurial types down here, people passing through. It's getting better, man.
Yeah.
Last point is, and I don't know how to say this, but basically we're considering adding a section on AdSense Flippers to allow others to sell their sites on our Buy Our Sites page. And this is something we really bounce back and forth on. I think there'd be value, right? Because there are people that want to buy sites, that are looking for a place to buy sites. And if we, allow them to purchase there, it'd be great. A little worried though. I don't want people selling crappy sites to people that read and listen to our stuff.
Yeah, the vetting process would have to be very strict, and we'd have to clearly say that these are not AdSense Flipper sites, that these are, from I don't know.
So-and-so and this
Yeah.
person, that person, yeah. I want to be clear, and yeah, we'll have to make sure that we check them out pretty closely. It'd probably be a couple of people that we know and trust now, and we'll kind of see how it goes. But I think it'd be cool. I mean, I think it's offering value where we can't. I mean, we don't always have sites available for sale, so if we're able to offer that to people and then, help other people that are trying to sell their sites out, I think that could be useful.
Yeah, from a technical perspective, there are a couple of hurdles to overcome, but I think more of a marketing message needs to be done.
Well, that's it for the news and updates. Let's get right into the heart of this week's episode.
The AdSense Flippers Podcast.
All right, so getting right into the heart of this week's episode, we have Thomas Smale with us. He owns and manages a company called Flipping Enterprises. In 2001, his company sold over $2 million worth of sites and was the number one seller on Flippa with more than $1 million in sales. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Hey guys, thanks a lot for having me on.
Good to have you. So I know a little bit about your backstory, from looking at some other interviews you did, but let's talk about this for a bit. So you were in university and you were like, many of us, looking to make a little bit of money online. What got you started? What really drove your buttons back then and got you going?
So I started out like many college or university kids that wanted to make a little bit of extra income, but in the city I was at university, there weren't really that many jobs going. So I thought it might be a good idea to look for some other things, and I'd always been quite interested in the online world, but never really got started. So I started messing around buying a couple of sites. I never had any technical background or anything like that, so I was kind of relying on my major was business, so I was relying on my business skills to grow the site rather than technical skills. So I started out buying and selling small sites, and then after a while I got quite good at it and got quite profitable quite quickly.
By small sites, you're talking a couple $100, right?
Yeah, I mean, I was starting out, $100-$200. I think I bought my site first site for a couple of hundred. And then after a while, I became reasonably successful at that, did that for a while. And then the thing that kicked off Flipping Enterprises as a company was a course we released on buying and selling sites, which happened to do really well. And then that kind of was the catalyst for the company growing and our reputation.
Yeah, that's interesting. What
Cool.
made you guys put together a course on buying and selling rather than just stick to buying and selling yourself?
Yeah, well, I mean, my business partner and I had both written a few articles, been on a few blogs, talking about buying and selling sites, and there was a lot of demand there. We found that, especially as we were at university, we really didn't have that much cash, despite the fact we were quite profitable. We're only making a few thousand a month, so we thought, well, if we launch a course and sell it for $97 like we did, we can probably accelerate our income a lot quicker than we could buying sites. So a lot of people out there might have $10,000, $20,000, and with the use of our course, they could then multiply that into hopefully even more. So I think at the time, it was a lack of cash flow, and just the fact that we thought we could accelerate our growth by launching a course.
Well, there's also the fact that, buying a site and then building it up and flipping it takes some time, right? So you've got that 3 or 4 month kind of no cash coming in, and this was meant to help that a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it was, partly cash flow. And just the fact at the time there were only two of us. I was still full-time at university. My business partner was doing other things. So it was also a time thing. So, yeah, we had limited resources, so it made sense to accelerate it by launching a course.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm really excited. I really want to talk about your business, Flipping Enterprises. But first, we're going to talk about basically 3 sections. So, building, buying, selling websites, the first section. Second section will be the business of brokering. And the third section will be all about Flipping Enterprises, because I have some questions I really want to get to you about your partnership and how your business is set up and that kind of thing. But first, I know that you guys buy and sell some websites yourselves still. I mean, and you're a brokerage, but you also still do that on your own. What kind of websites do you look to purchase? Like, what is there about a website that you say this is a good buy for us? Like, what kind of methodology do you put into place when you're looking to buy a site?
Yeah, I would say we're different from the average investor in that we like taking risks when it comes to our own purchases. So we tend to look for not necessarily a high-risk site, but a site that may not have had that much history. It may have a lot of traffic but not monetized very well. So we look for sites that we can clearly identify a way to improve the site. We're not passive investors. We don't have hundreds of thousands of dollars lying around to buy an investment that makes a return in a couple of years. We're looking for sites that we can buy for a couple of thousand and then have them turning over 4 or 5 figures a month within a few months. So, yeah, we look for high-risk sites that are quite new that we think we can grow, sites we can improve the monetization on, and anything where we see that the owner may have been... It's quite common for an owner, if they maybe own 10 or 15 sites, they've got a site that sits around and they're like, well, I haven't had time to sell advertising or whatever. So we've bought sites in the past where they say they can sell banner space, but they've never done it, so we'll buy the site, go and sell the banner space, and then make the most of that new income.
And most of these guys are coming to you through your business, right? I mean, because you do have a brokerage, they're looking to sell their sites, and then, you know, the ones that you think you're interested in or fit your particular needs, snatch up yourselves, right?
Yeah, we have got away from that a little bit lately, just because I'd rather have more sites to sell to my buyers. But yeah, the majority of the sites we buy do come to us as leads, I guess.
So you don't actively to get out there and look for sites. Because I would imagine you would find some really good value out there, but I'm not really sure I would go about finding them. I mean, do you do that at all?
No, we don't. But I mean, we could. But I mean, to be honest, we get tens of leads a day, so we don't really have the requirement to go and do that.
So Thomas, let's talk a little bit about like the kind of person that builds and sells high-end sites. Like, is there a profile that person kind of fits? Is it usually like a one-off, or are they chugging these sites out, a couple times a year? Dozens a year? What does that person look like? Is it a partnership, a business? What's the profile for that?
Yeah, I'd say there's a variety, but if you've got an individual that's selling like large sites, when we say high end, I would say 6 figures plus. So if you've got an individual, I would say they might only have 1, 2, or 3 sites. It's very rare for an individual to be literally working by themselves. They might have freelance help, they might have a virtual assistant, they might have a partner. When it comes to companies are slightly different in that you get some companies who have very large portfolios, and it's quite common for them to have actually bought the sites in their portfolio and then built them up. Whereas I'd say individuals tend to be the entrepreneurs who build it from scratch, whereas the companies tend to be companies who have invested in 5, 10 sites, built them up, and then looking to offload them for whatever reason.
So your buyers are often businesses, whereas the ones that are looking to sell that build it up from the ground up are more individuals or partners. Someone who's looking to spend, let's say, $150,000 on a site, is that normally a fund? Is it a group? What does a buyer look like?
I would say, we have a variety, but I would say at that level it tends to be a small investment group or a company who already owns a portfolio. You do get a few individuals, but generally speaking, if they've got that sort of budget, they've got some sort of infrastructure behind them. Interesting.
Go back to these leads that you say you get tens of leads a day. Do the people, when they come to you, do they have their shit together? Do they have the proof of their earnings, their accounting, all that kind of stuff? Because, this is something that we always preach about. I imagine, from your perspective, it'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, it really varies. Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. One thing that we have is if they want to put in a brokerage request with us, we've got quite a detailed form, and they can add attachments and stuff like that. And because most of the fields are compulsory, we don't get... It's not like we have a 2-field form that they can just fill out speculatively. They've actually got to put some effort into filling out the form. So generally speaking, if they've got past that level, they'll be okay. And then, based on the information we have, I then put them in touch with a broker who will then go over. And the first questions we ask are just to make sure that they've got everything in line. So, do you have your income documented? Do you have your traffic documented? And obviously, every now and then you get a seller who'll come to you and go, I made $100,000 last year. And then when you ask them if they can prove it, they can't. So obviously that's an instant reject. But it really does vary. It's rarely perfect. So it's very rare to have a deal where the seller has literally everything perfectly in line. So quite often buyers have to look around that and just accept the fact that, especially on sites under the $100,000 range, you're not always going to have a seller with an accounting department and perfect accounts. You're not going to have perfect systems. You might have some self-coded things. You might have self-written content. So, it really does vary.
Yeah, so I heard another interview, Thomas, where you're talking about, what investors look for in sites, especially in, let's say, the $50,000 to $200,000 range, which is a pretty big range, but, that's kind of outside of our area of expertise. And, I know a lot of lower sites or smaller sites that sell for less are based on, Google traffic. What do the mid to high level investors value about a site? Is it social engagement? Is it the back end programming that was put into the site? I know if you have earnings, it's easy to say, okay, well, a site's going to be worth this over a period of time, but how do you value all those other things?
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to valuation itself, I mean, it really is down to the income. That really is a key variable. But when it comes to desirability, I would say that obviously the more desirable a site is, the higher multiple you're going to get, because you might have more competition in the bidding or whatever. So I guess you would have two sets of buyers. You'd have the buyer who is buying the site for a strategic reason, and then a buyer who's buying it for a revenue reason. So if you've got a media company and they want to buy a site in a certain niche, they might only be interested in the traffic and the content, and how it's monetized might not really bother them. But then you might have an investor who's buying an e-commerce store, and it's really important that the seller has a good system in place. So someone who's shipping products out of their garage in Florida is not going to be as desirable as a drop shipping agreement where there's 4 or 5 suppliers who keep up with everything.
How are your buyers split up? Is it like, are we talking 50-50 on those that are looking just at income, or those that are looking for a strategic purchase, or is it heavily one way or the other?
I would say it's probably 90%. 90% of our actual sales would be based on the income. We do have a number of buyers, but the buyers who are looking for strategic purchases tend to have very specific criteria. So the chances of a site cropping up that would match their criteria is quite rare. So I would say the actual sales that go through tend to be based off revenue or profit multiples.
Yeah, they're like, I want a women's shoes e-commerce site that makes to this amount of money every year, that kind of thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, we have them sitting on our books, and if something comes up, then yeah, as we don't proactively look for leads, the majority of our sales tend to be based off income.
Thomas, I have one quick question, that's really interesting to me. With this big portfolio of sites that you are brokering or have as leads, how are you tracking all that? Do you have like a CRM for that, or some sort of system to make sure that you can match up buyers and sellers?
Yeah, that's something I've got my partner Brian to thank. He manages mainly the tech and operational side. So we've got internal database we've built up over the last, I'd say it's about 18 months old now. So when a lead comes in, it drops into a database, and then we can allocate it to, there's myself and 2 other brokers, so it'll get allocated to one of us. Then we keep up of it internally with notes. So from an admin perspective, I can see where all our leads are at a certain time. So it's a custom developed CRM.
Very cool.
Cool, Thomas. Keeping track of your data is pretty critical. We're still Google Doc. We joke about that, but we really should have went to a CRM quite a while back. We keep putting it off, though.
When we started, it was really just like they'd fill out a form and they'd go into a really basic database. But now we've got things like we can extract data and see which monetization method is the most popular site, which countries are our main customers. So we can break down a lot of data that can be quite useful.
Cool. Look, that kind of leads into our next section, which is, getting into the business of brokering. Let's set the scene a little bit. A university grad, you're buying $100 sites and flipping them for $1,000. You're making a little bit of pocket change, right? And then you continue to grow from there, and you decide to start brokering. How did you go from doing it yourself to getting people that want you to sell their sites, or are looking for sites to buy? How did you move from doing it yourself to actually doing the brokering?
Yes, I think when I started brokering, the biggest site I sold I think it was mid to high 4 figures. I can't remember exactly. So it wasn't massive, but it was in the thousands. To be honest, when we launched our course, that's kind of what started our reputation. And I think someone from there just contacted me and said, hey, can you sell my site for me? And I thought, hey, we'll give it a go. And I think that the first site we brokered, sold for, it was about 18,000 off the top of my head. And that was about 2 years ago now.
I like that. It's interesting, Joe, we do the free model where we give all the information away for free, right? But then we get a ton of buyers coming to us. They did a similar thing with a paid course, and then I think there was a membership site attached to that too, right?
It wasn't a membership site. It was a support forum, effectively.
Okay. So you have a group of people that have bought, that are previous buyers of yours, that are now in this group and can, bring you deals or ask you to sell their sites or ask for advice. And I think that's really interesting. They did a paid version of what we're doing, which is pretty cool. So I see that it was the course basically that got you your leads initially. If someone was looking to get started in brokering today, what do you think would be the best approach? Would you do that again, or what would you do differently starting as a broker today?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say that built our reputation. I wouldn't necessarily say that the people who bought the course at the time then turned out to be clients. But I mean, it was certainly some public exposure. If you're starting out, I mean, there are quite a few, in recent years, there have been quite a few individuals who have started brokering. I'd say probably the most important thing is having experience actually buying and selling your own sites. The last thing you want to do is start messing with a client's money, effectively, if you're going to sell their site and you've never actually done it before. You do get some courses that will tell you to just go approach people and say, hey, I can sell your site, write a Flipper listing, sell it, simple as that. But it's really not. You need... I mean, I didn't start when I had years of experience, but I did have some live deal experience selling my own sites. I understood how to run sites. So actually having the understanding is probably the most important thing. If you don't understand the site, then you're not going to be able to sell it. And then, yeah, I'd say probably, I mean, the way we went is probably the best way to go. So start small, get some experience, and then just start building yourself a reputation up.
Yeah, it's always better to have some direct experience before you start consulting to customers, because otherwise, I mean, you're really faking it at that point. So I can kind of see where you're coming from. But let me ask you, what do you think is more valuable in your business, the buyers or the sellers?
Yeah, I mean, that's a difficult question, because obviously they're both valuable. So whilst we're technically hired by the seller to sell their site, we've got a number of regular buyers, so I want to keep them both happy. And obviously, the business only works if you've got both. So if you said which is the most valuable and I had 1,000 sellers but no buyers, or 1,000 buyers and no sellers, then neither of those would work very well. So they're both equally important. I would say that buyer-wise, you probably tend to get more regular buyers than you get regular sellers, just because of what we were talking about earlier. You might have an individual that only owns 1 or 2 sites, but the companies who are buying might buy... I've got a buyer at the moment who buys 5 or 6 sites a month, so it really depends. But I would say, yeah, they're equal, but they have, there's merits of both.
We wrote a post recently, we called it The Problem with Flippa, and one of the problems we mentioned was the fact that Flippa seems to put a higher value on their sellers than they do their buyers. And that may or may not be true, but, you know, in your situation, you said that you normally deal with the sellers. You don't act as a buyer's agent. Is that right?
Well, I mean, it's something we do occasionally. Obviously, we have to work it a bit differently. I've done a little bit of work recently. I mean, the first thing, if we're working on behalf of a buyer, I would never take a deal on if there's a conflict of interest, i.e. I'm also representing the seller, because that could obviously cause problems. But I mean, recently I had a buyer who came to me who was looking to purchase a site off Flipper, and they just wanted a bit of advice. So charged them an hourly rate, gave them, obviously impartial. But the one thing I don't do is have a success fee or anything as a buying broker, because you don't want to have any incentive to tell them to make a bad decision.
Yeah.
If they buy due diligence, you want to be able to pick up on the negatives as well as the positives.
Of course. So, yeah, if they're asking to research the site for them or try to get, some due diligence on the site, that makes sense. So when you're acting as the sales agent, I mean, your fiduciary responsibility is basically towards them. What protections do you put in place should a deal go wrong? I know Flippa tries to do this. What do you do as a broker? What kind of due diligence do you do on your sellers to make sure that the sites are legit and everything is as it should be?
Yeah, so due diligence-wise, that's a difficult one. A lot of people, I mean, one of the issues with Flippa is I think they overly emphasize their due diligence tools as actual due diligence, but in reality, that's not real due diligence. So, I mean, we don't make it quite clear that we're not responsible for the due diligence, but I would say, as we're quite experienced, you're going to pick up on the majority of red flags quite quickly, and obviously if they're red flags, we're not going to take it on. And due diligence is quite subjective as well, so what might be an issue for one person is not necessarily an issue for someone else. So, for example, the other day we sold a site where it was an article business, and part of the due diligence came up that the site required an editor to look at the articles before they go out to clients. So for one client, that could be an issue, but the guy who ends up buying the site is actually an editor himself. So in that situation, it's quite subjective. So we leave it down to the buyers, and we keep it as open as possible from the due diligence side. And then when it comes to actually executing the deal, we use escrow.com for the majority of our deals, and we can also help them out with contracts, but we do advise buyers and sellers to seek independent legal advice. So we don't legally represent them or say, hey, this is a contract, this will be legally binding. We get them to run it past their attorney or lawyer.
We've had the problem of, we have plenty of buyers that, buy from our buyer sites page or whatever. The problem is that we've had a lot of sellers come to us and say, hey, can I sell my sites through you? And our issue with that has always been this, is that, we don't know how they created their site. We don't know what they put into it or, what sketchy stuff they're doing with it. So we've been hesitant to do that. And we know that if you ruin your name with buyers, that could be problematic. And I think that's part of your guys' success, is that you have buyers that like and respect the deals. I've seen the deals you guys are selling on Flip. I think you sell some great sites. So I think that's probably a good portion of your success too, is that your business is trustworthy.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about trust. I mean, I'm not saying that every single deal we do goes perfectly, but I think as long as you're transparent, most buyers are aware there can be issues. And I think one of the most important things, again, is communication. So the majority of disputes never have to escalate to any legal problems. Most problems, in my experience, can be sorted out literally with a phone call between buyer and seller. There might be some compromises there. And sometimes, I mean, the good thing about us, the fact we've got our own sites and our own infrastructure, is we can often help buyers or sellers. So if they've got an issue transferring the site, we can help with that. If they need some fresh content, or if they need someone to fulfill orders for a week, then we can help on that side, which is something that I guess is quite a good value add.
Yeah, that's interesting. Your post-sales support, something that I'm always big on when people say that they're going to get into the buying or selling business. So, I mean, do you have a set process for that? Or I guess with your kind of sales, it must be different every time because you don't really know what you're getting into.
Yeah, no, we don't have a set process. I mean, it really depends. I mean, we don't offer anything by default, but if they need help, then we don't have a problem with that. As long as it's within reason, we don't have a problem. But yeah, I mean, every deal's different, every buyer's different, every seller's different. Some buyers like to do everything themselves and you never hear from them again. Others need a little bit more hand-holding. So it does really vary.
I know that you guys generally handle sites that have a value of 10,000 or more. I know your average is about 50,000. You'd mentioned, but there's quite a bit of information out there about how to sell your sites yourself, right? I mean, there's plenty of free information out there. Why would someone go to a broker? Why is that a good option?
Yes, I mean, there's certainly some good information out there, and quite a lot of that we've done ourselves. So we're well aware that the information out there is quite solid. There's quite a few reasons to use a broker, and it does depend on the person selling. For some people, they're perfectly capable of selling it themselves, but they do. But I would say if your site is worth more than $10,000, especially $50,000 and up, I'd say a broker's almost definitely the best option. One thing to bear in mind is that the broker only gets paid on completion, so it's in their best interest to sell the site. I would say, if I had to say 3 reasons why people would come to me over doing it themselves. So A, you've got the peace of mind going through a broker. You've got our infrastructure. You've got our help. We're going to be around. We're not going to disappear. We've got a reputation to uphold. Utilising our experience in general. So it's highly unlikely you're going to come across a seller who's executed more deals than us. So whilst we might not have done hundreds and hundreds of large deals, we have done deals on lots of different platforms, lots of different monetization, lots of different buyers, lots of different sellers. I guess the main thing is the fact we've got the contacts, we've got the list in place, we've got existing relationships with buyers who trust us. And if you're a seller and never sold before, then you don't have that trust. And I would say that the fee you end up paying a broker, you probably end up making back in the fact that a broker will be able to get you more money for the site, mainly from just the trust perspective.
Yeah, I know as a seller that, anything in the 500 to like maybe 4,000 or 5,000 range, I'd feel completely comfortable doing myself. But if we're talking an $80,000, $100,000, $150,000 site, that's pretty outside of my area of expertise. Plus, that's a totally different buyer pool, right? So I was talking to Chris Guthrie about this. He sold one of his websites for $100,000, and that's one of the reasons he didn't sell it himself. He went to a house that does that because they have the investors, they have the buyers at that level that he simply wouldn't have had. I mean, he doesn't have those connections, so that's a pretty good reason to use a broker on high end.
And to be honest, if you're only selling 1 or 2 sites, it's really not worth the time and effort trying to get those relationships. Some of them take like years and years and many lunches and dinners and drinks, etc. to build. So they're not saying you can build overnight just by slapping a site up on Flipper and hoping you're suddenly going to be trusted by everyone. They do take time.
Yeah, a brand new seller on Flippa probably isn't going to flip a $150,000 site very well.
Well, you could do, but I mean, with the broker fee, let's say, for argument's sake, if you sold it your site, you might get 100,000. Whereas if you go to a broker, they might not get much more, but they might get 120,000, which will easily cover their commission, plus the fact they've done all of the work for you. So you save money there.
Well, let's transition a little bit into your business specifically. Let's talk about flipping enterprises a bit. Now, Thomas, I know that you met your current business partner on a forum.
Uh-huh.
Now, I see this all the time. Like, I go to the Warrior Forum and I see these joint venture offers, and I see some of them are just really kind of bad. How did that work for you? How did you find your future business partner in a large venture on a forum? That sounds crazy to me. How'd that work out?
Yeah, I mean, it was weird. I mean, I must admit, before then, I had a couple of bad experiences with bad partners, lost some money. So when we started out, we didn't actually actively seek a joint venture, but we were both quite active in the site flipping niche or the buying and selling niche. So we had seen each other around, and I think at the time the way we got together, we were actually both selling similar sites on Flipper, and I think we got in contact we said, hey, why don't we sell a couple of sites together rather than competing? And then we got onto the topic of, hey, why not write an ebook? And at the time, we honestly had no idea how many it was going to do. I mean, we thought if it made a couple of $1,000s, we would have been delighted. And then what we did is, obviously, we'd never met in person, so we just set a revenue target for the product, and as soon as the product had hit that level of sales, we would fly over, meet each other, and we thought that was the stage where we officially registered a company. So before that, it was very much just let's release the course, see how it goes. And then when it did well, we thought, hey, we're onto something here. We work well together, so let's formalize it.
That's actually a pretty good approach. I mean, too many people get caught up in the paperwork before any sort of money's on the table. So, speaking of which, do you have any investors or any other kind of silent partners in your country?
No, we actually, when we started it, I think when we launched the course, we probably had about $50 each into the company, so we had no investment. We've really built it up literally from nothing. We are actually, so in terms of ownership split, it's 50-50. In terms of external investors, no. We are thinking about bringing someone else in the next few months with some experience who might buy into the company a little bit, but that'll more be as someone else to help run the company rather than purely the cash.
Have you guys considered, you said right now you're spending your own cash reserves to buy sites. Have you considered actually building up that fund? To buying up 6-figure sites and even 7-figure sites?
Yeah, we did actually.
Is that a business path you take?
Yeah, we did actually work with one of our buying clients who I've known for a while on a low 6-figure deal recently where we basically did everything for him. He put the cash in, and now we run the site and we split the profits. So that is something we do, but it's not necessarily a core business. We're trying to. One of the problems we had when we first started out was we had 5, 10, 20 projects on at a time. We just never focused. So we thought, right, let's focus on brokerage. So I really do try and avoid taking on projects that aren't core. But we don't have any issue. Especially if it's a buyer we have a good relationship with, who might not understand, but might not be that familiar with the online world. We've got the infrastructure to run it, so it can be a win-win in that situation.
I feel your pain though, Thomas. The deals come across your plate, right? And you're like, this isn't my thing. This isn't what I should be doing right now, but it's good, right? It can be so frustrating sometimes when you're like, it doesn't fit my core business, but I like it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's exactly what we did with this site. I spotted some things that I thought could improve on it, and it had been a solid earner, so we thought, well, we'll run it for him, split the profits. He's happy, he's getting a return. We're happy, we're getting a fair return on our time. So it makes sense in that.
Cool.
So Joe and I, with our partnership, we go through periods where, he's doing more work and he gets frustrated, or I'm doing more work and I get frustrated, or it's not split as evenly as we'd like it to be. But we do have some core areas of responsibilities. How do you guys split up the work in your business? Who takes on what, and how did you decide that?
Yeah, I'm sure if you speak to Brian, he'll probably tell you that I'm lazy and I don't really do much, and he does all the work. But I would say over time it probably evens out. So we have our main office is in Riga in Latvia, where Brian lives at the moment. So he manages our Riga office. I guess his main responsibilities is he looks after the finances. So he tells me how much or usually how little money we've got to spend on new things. So he manages that. He manages the operations and the technical side, so the database. We own a few software products. anything on the technical side, anything on the operational side, and anything to do with finances. And then the brokerage is really me. I head up brokerage. I've got a couple of brokers in the US that I manage. We've got a couple of products we sell, and I tend to cover the sales for them. And then marketing as well is on me. But, I mean, I tend to be the public face of the company, but that doesn't mean Brian's not behind the scenes doing stuff. And it's not necessarily all me. I've got that infrastructure behind me if I need. So Brian tends to work. Latvia's got a time difference of 2 hours ahead, so Brian tends to be up like hours before me, and probably finishes a little bit earlier. But then I tend to, the nature of having a lot of clients in the US means might not work solid all day, but I'm usually around quite late.
Interesting. That split sounds a lot like what me and Justin have, but we're in the same time zone, so that makes it a lot easier to work for sure. So, one thing I'm really interested in is, what do you think is your biggest accomplishment with flipping enterprises so far?
Yeah, it's difficult. I wouldn't say there's anything specifically, but I mean, I think if you ask Brian the same question and you ask me, I think the main thing we're proud of is our reputation in general. We get a lot of business from referrals. It's not like we're buying leads or anything like that. So we're proud of our reputation. We've got a good reputation. I guess we're proud of the fact that, in general, the fact we managed to build a profitable business from scratch with no cash in quite a heavy recession. So that's good as well.
In a pretty short period of time, too. I mean, we're not talking about, 10 years you've been doing this. I mean, when were you in your university going, how the hell can I make money online? That was 4 years ago?
Yeah, I think I probably started messing around 4 years ago, and then we've had flipping enterprises for about 26 months now. We started in May 2010.
So that's, let's say 2 years you've really been kind of like running flipping enterprises. Where do you see you taking the business in the next 2 to 3 years? What are some of the, where's your longer term, I guess your mid-range vision for the company?
Yeah, so brokerage wasn't really something we started until about a year ago properly. And then at the beginning of this year, we decided that it would be more of a full-time focus. So our focus for the next couple of years is just going to be continuing building on that experience. And I mentioned we were thinking about bringing someone else into the company who's got slightly more formal experience brokering. So maybe we would like to start working on some slightly larger deals. As right now, like I said, like you mentioned, our average deal is probably around the 50,000 mark. We would like to get to the stage where we're covering deals from 10,000 all the way up to, say, 5 million. Whereas at the moment, we probably cap out around 500,000.
Yeah. So it sounds like you want to, kind of move up the value chain when it comes to brokering, which seems to be a pretty smart move. What's the end goal? I mean, are you looking for an exit, or do you want this to be a good 10 to 15, 20-year business? Where do you want to take flipping enterprises?
I think we see it as a long-term business, and I think the reason we got into brokerage, as well as the fact we knew what we were doing and it's quite nice cash flow, is we love getting the exposure to all the business owners. I think from a personal perspective, I'd quite like to get into angel investing or venture capital. So maybe moving away from selling businesses to actually helping people get their own businesses off the ground, maybe investing in businesses with people. And obviously with the seller leads we have, we've got quite good exposure to some great businesses. So in a couple of years, we have a pretty good idea what works and what doesn't.
You guys have done really well over the last couple of years, especially for such a short period of time. I mean, that's pretty expansive and aggressive growth. Looking back on it, though, are there any things that you go, wow, that was a path we shouldn't have had down. That probably wasn't the best move for us at the time. What regrets do you have about, any particular things you guys have done so far?
I would say this is a bit going against how I would advise my clients, but I think when we launched our course in May 2010, we sold it in September. So we were kind of went for the stereotypical build up a business and then flip it. So practicing what we preach, so to speak. At the time, it was the right thing to do to sell it, but I would quite like to still own that now because it was always good for the reputation. I would say probably the main regret, and you'd get exactly how we spoke to Brian, is we've taken on probably way too many projects that we shouldn't bother with, that we might have 10 projects and then 8 of the sites we just completely forget about and don't go anywhere. So that's one of the main reasons we sat down and focused on brokerage. We've always been profitable, so we've never really had issues on that front. But I think just lack of focus from the beginning. But I don't think that's anything we would have changed if you go back, because you've got to try different things until you figure out what works and how you work best together.
Well, Thomas, it's been great talking to you. It's great having you on the Ads and Slippers podcast. someone wants to get a hold of you, they want to reach you, what projects are you working on right now? Where can they get in touch?
So at the moment we're working on a lower end course just to help people who have got smaller sites to sell them, as we just can't, we reject, I think looking at the stats, probably about 95% of our incoming leads get rejected for whatever reason. So we've identified a demand for a product. But then the main way to get hold of us is if you just jump on our flippingenterprises.com website. We've got, if you follow the things, we've got a link to our buyer list, we've got a link to our latest listings. If you want to sell a site, we've got a brokerage form. And then we've also got a contact us form if you want to talk to me in person for whatever reason. You can do that as well.
Cool. We'll put a link to Flipping Enterprises on this podcast episode as well, so people can check it out. Anyway, anything else, Thomas? Anything else you want to say?
No, that's everything for me. I just want to say, well, thanks again for having me on. I appreciate the time you guys have taken.
It's been a blast talking to you, man.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. It's been so good talking to you.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks very much, guys.
So it was really great having Thomas on, Joe. I really appreciated having him on the podcast. I thought you got some great information. The only thing is, he sells, he brings together buyers and sellers at a fairly high level, like 10,000 plus. It seems like there's a real gap there between the $500 to $10,000 sites, right? If someone could fill that, it'd be great. The only problem is, as a broker, do you want 10 to 15% of a $1,200 site?
Yeah, I think that would be tough to do. And like he said, alluded to at least a little bit in the interview, I think setting up a marketplace is probably more effective for something like that.
Or just selling yourself on Flippa, right? That's the other route that, why deal with a broker? Just go straight to Flippa. At a higher level, it's harder to find buyers at $50,000, right? There's not as many of them, so it makes sense to kind of use someone that has those kind of buyer contacts. But yeah, if you're selling a $1,500 site, you're better off probably just selling it yourself, right? All right, well, let's get right into the ninja marketing tips, tricks, and our plans for the future.
The AdSense Flippers podcast continues.
So here's the first one we got for you today. It's from a site called flipfilter.com. Justin Gilchrist over there, who we've spoken to a few times and had some great chats with. He has a website evaluation tool. So, we talk about monthly multiples and how much your site is earning, but that's not always the best way to judge how much a site is worth. How old is it? What's the page rank? How many visitors do you get? There's value there too. So if you have this, awesome blog that's getting 100,000 visits a month and you just don't have it monetized properly, that doesn't mean that it's only worth 20x your earnings. So I want you to check that out. I'll put a link to it in the show notes, but yeah, it takes into account things like traffic, page rank, how involved your audience is. It's pretty cool.
Now still, I will put in the one caveat that your site is only worth as much as people are willing to pay for it. So like it said that AdSense Flippers was worth how much?
Like 105,000 or something.
Yeah. Do you really think that someone out there would buy it for 105,000?
Absolutely. But
really?
Yeah, you don't think so?
I don't know. I don't think somebody would buy it. We're so entwined in the business, they would have to have us on still to run the business.
Well, here's the thing. We wouldn't sell it for 105,000, right? We wouldn't sell it and walk away for 105,000. And we'd want more. And there's some level, the level at which someone would be willing to pay us, we wouldn't be willing to sell it for. And much more than that, it wouldn't be worth it to them because we're so ingrained in the business. It's so us, right? Yeah, that's the problem. Next tip we have for you is something called Pocket, which Joe's going to talk about because I have no idea what he's talking about here.
Well, I guess it's a lot like Evernote, except you can't take notes. But Pocket just allows you to basically temporarily bookmark a page, and then you can view it on your mobile device or on your computer or whatever your other pockets are synced up to.
Buddy, I swear to God, this is like the third tip you've mentioned. We're like, dude, I found this really cool thing. I'm like, yeah, it's called Evernote, dude. They have that. No, it's cool. Evernote's similar where you push a button and it will just take the text on the page, not even the advertisements or images or whatever, and just take the text so you can read it later. But Pocket's kind of like that. Anything else?
It used to be called Read It Later, so you guys might know it as that, but yeah, check it out if you're the kind of person that likes to, you stumble across stuff all the time, but you don't want to read it right now. You want to read it later, and you want to read it at the source, not some sort of copy or something like that.
Cool. We'll put a link to it in the show notes.
All right.
All right, that's it for episode 27 of the AdSense Flippers podcast. We appreciate having you on. Make sure to check us out on Twitter at AdSense Flippers, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Bye-bye, everybody.
You've been listening to the AdSense Flippers podcast with Justin and Joe. Be sure to hit up AdSenseFlippers.com for more. That's AdSenseFlippers.com. Thanks for listening.